Good morning, dear listeners. My name is Margaret Whitfield, and I am 74 years old. Before I begin, if you are watching today with a cup of coffee in your hand, know that I am grateful you are here. Every month, for years, my husband sent money to his sister. I believed it was kindness. I believed it was duty. I believed many things, because believing was easier than asking why. I met Lawrence Whitfield in the late 1960s, when jukebox songs drifted from diners and the roads glimmered after summer rain. People called him Larry. He drove an intercity bus that stitched small towns to larger ones. A steady man in a navy jacket with a clipboard tucked against his ribs. I was the oldest daughter of a waterman who had traded his boat for a warehouse job, learning to hem skirts at a neighbor kitchen table. We met outside a grocery when a paper bag tore and apples rolled across the sidewalk. He laughed. I laughed. And in that small shared sound, a door opened. We married quickly, as many did then. A small church on a quiet lane. A borrowed dress I altered to fit my narrow shoulders, and white shoes that gave me blisters. We rented a cramped apartment above a locksmith shop in Baltimore County. At night, the scent of oil and metal climbed through the floorboards, and the radiator clicked like a stubborn metronome. We learned to count pennies. We learned to share blankets. We learned to tell our future children stories about places we could not yet afford to visit. The children came one by one. First Paul, then Ruth, then little Daniel, with his soft laugh that could mend the worst of days. I measured seasons by their shoes. Spring was canvas sneakers with chalk scuffs from hopscotch squares. Winter was boots drying by the stove. Larry took longer routes, the kind that pulled him from the bay to the mountains and back again. He came home with road dust on his cuffs and a tired, easy grin. For the family, he said. Always for the family. In our second year, he told me about his sister. Her name was Nora, and she lived in Annapolis. She had health troubles, better left private. He pressed a small envelope into my hand and asked me to drop it at the post office. Help me help her, he said. Of course, I said. After that, the envelopes became a rhythm. Once a month. Sometimes more when he worked extra shifts. There were weeks when the rent pressed like a thumb on a bruise. Paul needed a school coat. Ruth needed crayons that did not crumble. Daniel woke with a cough, and the pharmacy bill bit hard. I would see an envelope resting on the mantel, with Nora written in careful block letters. And I would swallow the question sitting on my tongue. A good wife trusts. I told myself. A good sister-in-law does not pry. So I folded laundry, mended knees on tiny jeans, and walked those envelopes to the post office with a polite smile for the clerk. Trust can be a soft light. It can also be a fog. Those early years were painted in both, tender and blurred. The way the bay looks before sunrise when you can hear the gulls but cannot yet see their wings. By the 12th year of my marriage, the rhythm of those envelopes had blended into the wallpaper of my life. I did not question. I did not doubt. Until small shadows began to fall where the light used to be. It started with Larry's schedule. For years, his bus runs were predictable. Monday to Wednesday, he drove to Harrisburg. Thursday through Saturday. Sometimes Philadelphia, sometimes further south. He always left in uniform. Crisp navy jacket, cap tucked neatly under his arm. Then, slowly, the pattern shifted. He would say he had an extra shift to New York, but returned 2 or 3 days later without the smell of diesel clinging to his clothes, without the scuffed soles that came from walking long bus platforms. Once, I noticed his hands smelled faintly of soap and starch, not gasoline. It unsettled me in ways I could not name. One winter evening, while folding laundry in the kitchen, I slipped my hand into the pocket of his coat. Instead of the loose change I expected, my fingers brushed thick paper. I pulled out a folded birthday card made of construction paper, decorated with colored dots like a child might paste in school. On the front, It read, "Happy birthday." Inside, the words were careful, deliberate. "Happy birthday, our love. May God give you many more years as the wonderful father and husband you are. With love, Nora and Rebecca." The room tilted. Husband. Father. Who was Rebecca? My throat closed. My palms dampened the paper until the ink smudged faintly. For a long time, I just stared at those words. Larry's birthday had been the month before. I had baked him a cake, bought him a simple new watch, and he had barely touched the frosting. Now I knew why. He had already celebrated somewhere else, with someone else. I slipped the card into my apron pocket, heart pounding. I told myself not to confront him yet. A part of me still clung to the hope that there was another explanation. But a heavier part whispered that my life was already unraveling. Days later, the telephone rang in the afternoon. We had only just managed to install one, and it still startled me. I answered. Whitfield residence. A man's voice spoke briskly. "This is Harbor Transit Company. Could I speak with Mr. Rind? Lawrence Whitfield? He's away on a New York run." I replied. There was a pause. "Impossible. Ma'am, the New York route hasn't been assigned this week. We tried to reach him for a last-minute replacement run. He hasn't checked in." I nearly dropped the receiver. I forced my voice steady. There must be some mistake. "He left Monday morning." Silence again. Then a clipped, "Sorry for troubling you, ma'am," and the line went dead. I stood there, the receiver heavy in my hand, my reflection faint in the kitchen window. Not in New York. Not on the road. Then where? The seed of suspicion that had been whispering inside me began to root deep and cold. After the phone call, my nights grew restless. I would lie in bed beside the hollow where Larry usually slept, listening to the groan of the radiator and the distant hum of trucks on the highway. The birthday card burned in my mind. The words father and husband scratched at me like a thorn. I could not pull free. One morning, while looking for Paul's school report in the drawer where Larry kept old receipts, I stumbled on an envelope tucked beneath a pile of bus schedules. My breath caught. On the front was a name written in Larry's careful block letters, Nora Whitfield. Beneath it, an address in Annapolis. My hands shook as if I had touched a live wire. I copied the address on a slip of paper and hid it behind the photo in our wedding frame. The irony did not escape me hiding evidence of betrayal behind the memory of vows sworn before God. For days, I tried to act normal, cooking supper, helping Ruth with her spelling words, mending Daniel's trousers. But the address whispered to me at night. 2 weeks later, Larry packed a bag and announced he was driving to Philadelphia for a 3-day run. He kissed my cheek with a tired smile. The moment the door closed behind him, I felt the house exhale. I knew it was time. I left the children with my friend Clara, who lived next door and never asked too many questions. Just a quick trip, I told her. She studied me for a moment. Eyes narrowed, but nodded. I packed a small handbag, slipped the birthday card inside, and walked to the Greyhound station. The bus ride to Annapolis lasted barely 2 hours, yet each mile felt like a tightening knot. I stared at the flat fields flashing past, my reflection hovering faint in the glass. My mind raced with possibilities. Was Nora truly his sister after all, raising someone else's child? Or was I about to uncover something darker? Something that would shatter everything I thought I knew when the bus pulled into the terminal. My legs trembled as I stepped onto the platform. The air smelled of salt and river water. I followed the directions scribbled on the slip of paper, catching another city bus that wound through quiet, tree-lined streets. The houses here were larger than ours, their porches freshly painted, their gardens trimmed. Each turn of the wheels deepened the pit in my stomach. Finally, the bus stopped at a corner. I stepped down and looked across the street. There it was, A pale yellow house with a neat front yard and a sign hanging from the converted garage. Nora's Atelier, custom clothing. Bolts of fabric were visible through the wide windows, shimmering under the light. I pushed the gate, my palms damp. The bell above the shop door jingled softly as I entered. The air smelled of starch and lavender. Dresses hung on mannequins, their hems stitched with delicate care. Shelves gleamed with rolls of fabric, brighter than anything I had ever been able to afford. "Good morning," a voice chirped. A girl appeared from the back, no more than 14, her long brown hair tied neatly, her smile shy. Then I saw her eyes. My knees weakened. Those eyes were identical to Paul's gray, flecked with hazel, the Whitfield eyes. "May I help you?" she asked politely. I swallowed hard. "I am looking for Nora." "My mom ran out for supplies," she said, "but my dad is home. Would you like to speak with him?" My heart lurched. My dad. The seconds stretched as footsteps sounded in the back room. And then, in the doorway, stood Larry. His face blanched, eyes wide, as if he had seen a ghost. For a moment, no one breathed. Larry froze in the doorway, his hand still gripping the frame, his mouth slightly open. The girl looked from him to me, confused. "Dad," she said, "do you know her?" His lips moved, barely shaping my name. "Margaret." Hearing it in that shop, far from our home in Baltimore County, was like a knife. The girl's eyes widened. "Dad, who is she?" Before he could answer, the front door opened. A woman walked in carrying a bolt of fabric against her hip. She was elegant, her hair pinned neatly, her lipstick fresh. She stopped when she saw me, her smile collapsing into silence. "This is Nora," Larry whispered, voice raw. Nora's eyes darted between us. She set the fabric down, her hands trembling. "Larry, what is happening?" I pulled the birthday card from my purse, my fingers shaking as I held it up. "This," I said, "this is what is happening." The girl Rebecca looked at the card, then at her mother, then at her father. Her face crumpled. "Dad?" Her voice broke. "Is it true? Do I have brothers and a sister?" I nodded slowly, the words tasting like ash. "You do. 3 of them. Paul, Ruth, and Daniel." And soon my voice faltered. Soon another. Larry's head jerked up. "Another?" I pressed my palm against my abdomen, though I had told no one yet. "Yes, Larry. I am expecting a child who will grow up in the shadow of your lies." Nora's breath caught. She turned to him, fury twisting her features. "You told me you were a widower. You said you could never marry me because you lived off a pension. You swore on your parents' graves." Rebecca's tears fell freely now. "You said it was just us, that we were your only family." Larry ran a hand down his face, a gesture I knew too well. He always did it when trapped. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he stammered. "I love you both. I love all of you." My voice rose, sharp and raw. "Love? Is that what you call it, feeding us scraps while you built her this shop? Telling me your sister was sick while you raised another daughter behind my back? 13 years? Larry. 13 years of lies." The shop felt suffocating. Dresses on mannequins seemed to watch silently, witnesses to the wreckage of our lives. Nora's face paled. "All those envelopes you gave me, were they her money?" She pointed at me, her hand shaking. "Yes," I said, bitterness burning my throat. "Every dollar that could have bought our children shoes or medicine went here." Larry reached toward me, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Margaret, we can talk. We can fix this." I stepped back. "Do not touch me," Nora's voice cracked like glass. You spent half your life telling me lies. You told her lies, too. And now our daughter stands here in the middle of it all. Rebecca pressed her palms to her face, sobbing. Why? Dad? Why? No one answered. The silence was louder than any scream. I do not remember leaving the atelier. One moment I was inside, Rebecca's sobs echoing in my ears. Nora's face pale with fury, Larry stammering excuses. The next, I was outside in the chill March air, my feet carrying me toward the bus stop as if they belonged to someone else. The ride back to Baltimore blurred past. My hands clenched the slip of paper with Nora's address until it tore. By the time I stepped off the bus near our narrow row house, I had made my decision. When Larry returned, I would not be waiting with supper. I would not ask him how the road had been. He would gather his things and go. And he would not come back. But he never returned. Sunday passed. Then Monday. On Tuesday. The phone rang again, this time a call from Harbor Transit. The dispatcher said Larry had left a letter on the manager's desk. He had quit without explanation. My stomach dropped. He had not only abandoned me and the children, he had abandoned Nora and Rebecca too. That week was the longest of my life. The rent notice lay on the kitchen table like a threat. My pay from hemming skirts was not enough to feed 3 children, let alone 4 with another on the way. My belly's still flat, but I felt the weight of that unborn child pressing me forward. I searched through drawers for any savings. Larry had left none. Instead, I found overdue bills and, worse, 2 letters from men I did not know. Loan sharks. He had borrowed money in my name. The blood drained from my face. The next evening, there was a knock at the door. 2 men in leather jackets stood on my porch. Their smiles were polite, but their words sharp. Your husband owes. And if he's gone, you pay. My knees buckled. I managed to stall them, promising to speak to the bank. They left, boots heavy on the steps. But I knew they would be back. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the children had gone to bed. Paul had asked where his father was. Ruth had cried herself to sleep. Daniel clutched his toy truck, whispering, Daddy will bring candy when he gets home. I turned off the lamp so they would not see me weep. When dawn broke, I took out my mother's old Singer sewing machine, the one I had nearly pawned years earlier. I set it on the kitchen table, wound the bobbin with trembling hands, and began to sew. At first, it was small hemming skirts for neighbors, patching coats, mending trousers. The coins clinked into a jar, barely enough for bread and milk. But word spread. Within weeks, people knocked on my door with bags of clothing. Soon, the living room filled with spools of thread, scraps of fabric, and an iron that hissed late into the night. The gossip in the neighborhood grew too. Her husband ran off. She's pregnant again. How will she survive? Their whispers followed me like shadows. But I refused to bow my head. Each stitch I pressed into cloth was defiance. Each finished garment a declaration. We will not starve. We will not fall apart. It was not much. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Spring crept into summer, and still there was no word from Larry. Only silence, like a door slammed and nailed shut. I had begun to think of him as a ghost who once wore a driver's cap and smelled of diesel. Nothing more. My days were a blur of thread and fabric, of keeping children fed and pretending to neighbors that everything was fine. One humid afternoon, the phone rang. The voice on the other end made my chest tighten. Margaret, this is Nora. For a heartbeat, I almost hung up. Then I heard the tremor in her tone, the kind I recognized too well. Yes, I said, my throat dry. He left us, she whispered. One night, he kissed Rebecca good night and said, head be back in the morning. He never came. The shop is failing. The bills, her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. Anger surged, but beneath it, something softer stirred recognition. She was living my nightmare in a different house. What do you want from me? I asked. Advice. Help. Anything. The words hung between us. I thought of Rebecca's wide eyes, so much like Paul's. I thought of the way Nora had dropped that fabric bolt when she realized who I was. We were both standing in the wreckage of the same storm. Come to Baltimore, I said finally. I can't promise much, but maybe together we can survive. 2 weeks later, Nora and Rebecca arrived with 2 suitcases and haunted faces. I arranged a room for them in my friend Clara's house down the street. Clara, once suspicious, softened when she saw Rebecca clutching a worn teddy bear, though she was already 15. At first, everything was tense. Paul refused to look at Rebecca, and Ruth muttered that she was the reason Dad left. Nora carried herself stiffly, ashamed yet defensive. But little by little, cracks appeared in the walls between us. Rebecca and Paul both loved books, and I caught them one evening on the porch, swapping dog-eared novels. Ruth, after weeks of pouting, discovered Rebecca could braid hair better than anyone and began to sit quietly while her half-sister's fingers worked. Even Daniel, young and forgiving, started calling her Becky as if she had always been there. One evening, as the children played, a knock sounded. I opened the door to find a stranger holding a sealed envelope. This was left at a pawn shop with your name, he said before disappearing into the night. My stomach tightened as I tore it open. Inside were scraps of Larry's handwriting, E.S., forged notes, debts he had left scattered like broken glass. Nora leaned against the wall, pale. So he used both of us, she whispered. I folded the papers with steady hands. Yes, and we are the ones left to clean the wreckage. For the first time, her eyes met mine without anger, only exhaustion. Maybe we don't have to fight each other. Maybe we fight for the children instead. I nodded slowly. Then let's fight together. That night, I felt the shift. Betrayal had bound us to the same wound, but survival would bind us to the same path. The decision came quietly, over chipped mugs of coffee at my kitchen table. Nora stared at her hands, calloused from years of sewing, and said, I can't go back to Annapolis. The creditors circle like vultures. Rebecca deserves better. I looked around our cramped row house, its living room already buried under fabric scraps and spools of thread. Then stay, I answered. Stay, and let's turn this work into something bigger. That was how Harbor Grace Clothing was born. 2 women, discarded by the same man, stitching scraps into survival. At first, it was laughably small. We set up a secondhand sign in the window, borrowed a rack from Clara's basement, and begged the school principal to let us hand out flyers. Customers trickled in, neighbors needing uniforms hemmed, churchwomen wanting Easter dresses, a mechanic's wife who dreamed of a proper gown for Sunday service. The work was endless. We cut patterns on the floor while the children did homework around us. We ironed until our arms ached, stitched until our fingers bled. Yet, there was a strange joy in it, a sense of building something that was ours, not his. People whispered, of course. 2 abandoned women running a business together. Some called us foolish. Others pitied us. But the gossip only hardened our resolve. Each satisfied customer was proof that we could carve out dignity from the ruins. The children began to play their parts. Paul, now a teenager, delivered finished garments on his bicycle, a ledger tucked under his arm. Rebecca, sharp with numbers, took over bookkeeping, balancing receipts better than any adult I had known. Ruth discovered an eye for color and started sketching small designs that drew praise. Daniel, still young, swept floors and fetched spools, proud to be useful. One summer evening, as we locked up the shop, a man approached with a bundle of uniforms. He introduced himself as a manager from a local seafood cannery. "We need aprons and smocks," he said, reliable and sturdy. "Can you handle a bulk order?" Nora and I exchanged a look. It was the break we needed. We worked through nights, children napping on bolts of cloth, the machine humming like a heartbeat. When we delivered the finished uniforms on time, the manager shook our hands with genuine respect. Word spread. Soon, we were supplying schools, small clinics, even a nearby shipyard. Amid this fragile triumph, news of Larry came like a ghost's whisper. A letter from a cousin arrived one autumn morning. Larry had been killed in a car accident on a highway in North Carolina. No funeral for us to attend. No estate to claim. Just a brief obituary clipped from a local paper. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. Nora stood beside me, silent. Rebecca wept softly in the corner. Strangely, I felt no relief, no vengeance, only a hollow peace. The man who had built 2 families on lies had ended alone on a stretch of asphalt. That night, as the children slept, Nora and I lit a single candle in the window. Not for him, but for us, for the freedom his absence gave us, for the chance to keep building without his shadow. Years slipped into decades, stitched together by the whir of sewing machines and the laughter of children who grew taller, then left to build lives of their own. Harbor Grace Clothing grew too, moving from our cramped row house into a sunlit storefront on Main Street. The sign above the door gleamed, not as a monument to profit, but to survival. I often stood in that shop's window, watching the town bustle, and thought back to the girl I had been, the 16-year-old bride who believed every word a man spoke, the young mother who walked to the post office with envelopes of money addressed to a sister who never was. I barely recognized her anymore. The children blossomed in ways I could never have imagined. Paul became an architect, designing schools with windows that poured in light, so kids never feel trapped, he explained. Ruth followed her gift for design and returned to the shop, turning our simple uniforms into elegant, affordable fashion. Daniel, ever full of energy, became our salesman, drawing in contracts from businesses far beyond Maryland. And Rebecca, dear Rebecca, grew into the daughter of 2 mothers. She studied business, streamlined our accounts, and later opened a foundation to help girls whose families had abandoned them. Nora, my unlikely sister, lived to see the fruits of our work before illness claimed her. I held her hand in those final weeks, remembering the day I first stepped into her atelier in Annapolis with rage in my chest. We had started as enemies without choice, bound only by betrayal. We ended as family by choice, bound by love. Now, at 74, I sit on the porch of the house our business built, the hum of crickets rising from the yard, photographs of grandchildren covering my walls. I have never remarried. There were kind men who offered, but I had already lived the life I was meant to live. My legacy was not in finding another husband, but in proving that one man's betrayal could not define me. The greatest lesson of my life is simple. Though it cost me years to learn, family is not just blood. It is who stands beside you in the storm. Larry tore apart 2 households, but in doing so, he unknowingly gave us the chance to build one stronger than he ever imagined. Pain can be a forge. Betrayal can be a beginning. And sometimes the crack in your world is not the end. It is where the light comes through. To you listening now, perhaps carrying your own secrets and wounds, I say this: do not measure your worth by those who failed to love you. Measure it by the strength you find when you rise, trembling but unbroken, and take the next step. I did, all those years ago, when I boarded a bus to Annapolis and walked into a truth that should have destroyed me. Instead, it set me free. If my story touched you, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you are watching from. Your kindness helps me continue telling these stories. And maybe, just maybe, my words will be the thread someone else needs to stitch their life back together.